further ado, here is Duke Sean from Artemisia, and he's going to give us his 5 tips on or methods to be a better fighter in the SCA.
Right on. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So I mostly just have bullet points and to remind me of the key things I wanted to cover, because I could go on for hours and hours on end, and anybody who's talked to me about fighting knows. So first thing that I want to talk about is passion. This is something that you had talked about and referred to as finding your why. Curious enough, you had that as your first thing as well. There's some truth to that. Passion is the one thing that I can't give you. I can't give you your why. I can't make you love what we do. If you do love what we do and you're passionate about our sport, then there's nothing that we can't teach you how to do. And when I'm talking about passion, and we hear all the time about these sacrifices that have to be made to be better at our sport. And I'm not talking about quitting your job so that you can go to an event. I'm not talking about sacrificing the well-being of yourself and your family for the sake of being better at this. But if you're spending too much time on Facebook, or you're playing too much Candy Crush, there are times there is time available that you could be doing what is necessary to make yourself a better fighter in our sport. Likewise, it's that passion, that drive, it's that thing that always makes you think about being a better fighter. And it's the little things, like if your company happens to be sending you across the country for work, it's you thinking about taking your armor and packing it in there and trying to find a way that you can take your armor just in case there's a fighter practice, and knowing that even if you don't get to practice because work is too busy, that's way better than being able to go to a practice and not having your armor and saying I just couldn't make it. And it's that constantly thinking about it. But that passion and that love and that drive, it's the one thing that cannot be taught. It can be learned. You can develop that passion, but if you have that passion and you love what we do, then the world is open to you. So the second thing that I have is something that is kind of one of my soapbox speeches that everybody has heard me talk about, and you're going to hear me talk about for all time and eternity, and that is redefining your victory conditions. Ours is a sport in which success in our sport is largely measured by one consistent variable, and that variable is body count. That's the one thing that people recognize. It's the one tangible thing that we have to measure whether or not somebody is successful in our sport. But the concern for wins and losses and the concern for body count is actually counterproductive to being a better fighter. And so you need to reevaluate your victory conditions. And by that, what I mean is, what does it take for you to consider your fighting experience to be a success? Whether that's a tournament or practice or whatever you're doing, what has to happen in order for you to feel like you had a victory, that you had some measure of success throughout the day? If you go to a tournament and your measure of success is winning the tournament, and there is no other option for measuring whether or not you did well, if winning the tournament is your only measure of success, you are going to be grossly disappointed a vast majority of times, because only one person can win the tournament. And statistically speaking, it's not going to be you every time. And if that's your only measure, if that's the only way you can feel like you had any kind of success, you're going to be disappointed, and it's going to drive you insane, honestly. So redefining your victory conditions and having a better sense of what victory means. And that could very well, honestly, some days victory just means actually making it to fighter practice. There are people that have, we all have, lives and jobs and family and kids and things that get in our way. So sometimes just getting to practice that's your victory, just being there at all. Once you get to practice on a consistent basis, and you're at practice, and you need to establish what you want to be working on for the day, and what success means. And so this is something that I talk about a lot because honestly, it happened to me as part of my journey, where early on, after I'd been a knight for a while, I was measuring success on winning, crown tourney or cornet list, and then when I didn't, I was just killing myself, trying to find out what was wrong, and that was the only measure I had. And it was the moment that I was able to finally get over that as a measure. And when I went into a list and I realized that I was going to do well and I was going to go deep in the list, and that didn't mean necessarily that I would win the tournament, but I was going to do well. And once I was okay with that, and accepting that as my victory condition, and knowing that I was gonna do well, I was gonna go deep, that's the thing that really kind of got me over the hump. Hang on just a second. This is gonna look kind of weird, but I just got the battery low on my headset thing.
No problem.
So I gotta plug that in.
Yeah.
Got all these wires.
Glad I'm not the only one with technical difficulties tonight. And the other night, oh my gosh. You can't hear me.
Did I turn you off?
No, you're good. I was talking and I didn't realize you had earplugs in, so.
Hang on a second. I gotta turn it on again. Connect. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
You can hear me. I can't hear you. Hang on a second. I've got two.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, especially if I'm not on mute.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so the first thing we had is passion. The secondly is redefining your victory conditions. So the third thing that I'm going to talk about is training methodology, having and using an actual training methodology. This is the one thing that I am trying to change in our sport, is how we teach our sport.
Yeah.
For the longest time in our sport, it was because we were making this up, as we go along, and we have been since day one. Mm-hmm. Success in our sport largely came from, you put people in armor and you send them out on the field, and somehow they magically glean the information from the experience.
Right.
And that just leads to a situation where the people that are more successful are people that have some sort of athletic or martial arts background. The people that are stronger, the people are faster, the people are younger. And there are people that thrive under that learning environment. Mm-hmm. But overall, it is just a horribly inefficient way to teach people how to do things. That's just not how people learn. And as a trainer by trade, or by your education, you know this. This is not how people learn things. So having a good training methodology, basically the essence of my training methodology is to isolate and eliminate deficiencies, to find out what is wrong with your fight, and then identify what those things are, and then go to practice and start working on each one of those individual parts, to break that down. If you're following a good training process, the process always works. I'm not really concerned about what you are learning. I'm much more concerned about how you're learning it and the methods that you're using to approach practice, to separate out training from practice and from an evaluation. And having a good training methodology, having a good process, and following that process and having faith in that process. It's going to seem slow at times. My training methodology in particular is kind of a slow burn, where it's kind of the Mr. Miyagi school of fighting. It's a lot of, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? There's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of going over the same stuff over and over again, and without, with very little tangible results. Sorry, dog. Hey, knock it off. Dog. Hey, knock it off. And it seems like there's, very little tangible results for the longest time. And then at a certain point, you make a turn and things start getting better. And when they do, your fighting increases like exponentially, and it's a steep, sharp curve upwards. That, if you just got to have faith in it, and you got to realize that it's going to take time. And if you put the time into it, in the beginning, then that time is going to pay off, and eventually you're going to have those successes later on down the road. And once it makes that turn, there's no turning back after that. There's no slowing down. You're just going to increase rapidly after that. So the next thing I have is Pell work. There's some folks that have been wildly successful that have said that they haven't done any Pell work at all. Pell work is the one thing that you can do on your own to give you the greatest benefit for the time that you spend. I did a year and a half of Pell work before I set foot on the fighting field at all. And I was young when I first started doing Pell work. I wasn't old enough to fight at all anyway, and so I was just doing Pell work. I had a tire hanging from a tree in my backyard, and I had an old pickaxe handle without the head on it that I was using, and I was relentlessly swinging at the Pell all day long, and it was never work for me. It was just, I could either do that or I could go out, smoking pot with my friends. And so, this is the choice I made. And it was just, it was never work. It was enjoyable. It was, I'm 12, 13 years old out in my backyard, like, hey, look at me, I'm a knight. I get to hit people with sticks. But that Pell work, the amount of time that I spent doing Pell work, I did more Pell work in that year and a half before I started fighting than most people do in their entire lifetime. And I don't do as much Pell work now, but over the course of the last 35 years or so, I estimated recently that I've probably thrown a flat snap no less than 1 million times.
Makes sense.
And that's your 10,000 hours. That's that time. And there's a mythology about Pell work, about what it is and how long it takes and what you should be doing and all this. And the 100 shots a day Pell routine that the Facebook page we have for that is a great place to start, because doing 100 shots of Pell work a day is way better than trying to do 800 shots on the weekend trying to catch up. Just taking 5 minutes of your day, 3 to 5 minutes of your day to do that Pell work is way better than not doing anything at all. Mm-hmm. You are not going to become a godlike fighter in 5 minutes a day, but that will get you out of the Pell, and it keeps you involved. And that again goes back to that passion, just finding that desire to go out there and just do 100 shots. That's a good start. But basically you can do what needs to be done in less than about a half an hour of Pell work. But Pell work is one of those things that I think is highly overlooked, especially in the beginning stages of fighting. There's a lot of people that, again, just want to get in armor and just go swing at it. But and Pell work is that thing that you can do when you can't do something else, when injuries prevent you from fighting, or when life and job circumstances prevent you from fighting. Pell work is one thing you can always do pretty much anywhere to keep yourself engaged and keep yourself active and still be part of it. So Pell work is huge, and we should be doing more of it. Also, a keynote on Pell work, as I'll say, if you're striking at your Pell hard and fast, you are never going to learn. You're going to blow out your elbow before you learn how to actually throw the shots right. Pell work is slow, and it is deliberate, and it is minimal impact, like incidental contact at best. And I know there's some varying theories on this. There's some people that think that the only way to do it is to do it like you're doing it for real. The best way that I've come to explain, why you need to do Pell work as slow as you do, is if you think about it, from typing on a keyboard. If you're using if you're not doing the hunt and peck, and if you're actually doing touch typing, you're using the homer on the right keys. For those people that do type, when you first started typing, because I didn't take type class in high school, so I taught myself how to type, and it was slow and dreadful and boring and tedious. You don't just sit down at a keyboard and start typing 80 words a minute. It's a lot of slow, repetitive, home row, QWERTY, ASDF stuff. And that's how your body learns things, by doing it correctly and doing it slowly. So that's why I recommend doing Pell work slow and with minimal impact as well. Because you need to teach your body how to do the basic mechanics. You don't need to teach your body how to plow through your Pell that's not trying to block itself. So, yes, they work. To cover the first 4 points so far: passion, redefine your victory conditions, use a good training methodology, Pell work. And the last thing is something that you pointed out, and that is to seek out the best. Hey, there's my daughter now.
Hi.
Nope, they can't hear you, but I can. So seek out the best. Seek out the absolute best fighters in our sport. I made a comment on a friend's post yesterday. Made a comment yesterday that is something I've said for years. The people who have the information that you need are dying to give that information away to people who are actually going to do something with that information. There's a great myth out there that the best fighters in the world, if you go fight those guys, then they're just going to beat you up so that they can, make themselves feel better about themselves. And that is just really just nonsense. The people that have that information, like we want to give it away to people that are going to do something with it. Because as much as for as long as I've been doing this, and for all the success I've had for myself, the thing that gives me absolute joy right now is watching somebody else find their own success with the tools that I'm able to give them, to let them learn from my experience, and to watch them grow and watch them be successful, and to watch them, to have them defeat me in tournaments, with stuff that I've taught them. Watching people find their own success is way more exciting to me now than any success I can have for myself. It is absolutely intoxicating, and it's what keeps me going. When I started fighting, the first time I set foot on the fighting field was 35 years ago at Australia War. So this past Australia was 35 years of my fighting. And a month after that, my knight, Brian Tarragon, won his first crown. That was the first of 5 crowns in a row, with the required break in between. And everywhere Brian went, he's just get in the car, we're going. And I'd go there, and of course everybody wants to fight the King of Aiden belt. And so when we get done, Brian says, "Thank you for the fights. Would you be kind enough to give some fights to my squire here?" So here I am getting cast-offs from the King of Aiden belt. And he's, obviously he's fighting the best fighters in the world. And, I never questioned it. I never said, well, that guy's going to just beat me up. Why would I want to fight that guy? Brian said, fight him. I said, yeah, I'll go fight him. And I never, I think there was a lot of my early success that was like really based on a lot of just ignorance. I just do what Brian told me to do, and well, it worked. And as it turns out, from the very beginning of my fighting career, I've been fighting with the absolute best fighters in the world, and that's all I've ever known. And I still seek them out, and because the better you get, the harder it is for you to find those people who can humble you, who can send you home with that feeling like you don't know anything about what you're doing, and to reignite that passion and to make you go home and do that work. And seeking out the best is kind of the key to, it's the why again. It kind of circles back to all of these things that I talked about. When you have that moment where you just have somebody just clean your clock, it makes you go home, and it makes you think about what you're doing and what you need to do to change, and it reignites that passion, and it makes you go to practice, and it makes you change your victory conditions so that you're working on this one thing that was exploited. And it makes you go back and look at that training and reapply that training methodology and go through the process of training and practice and evaluation to try to get better at that one thing, and then to do more Pell work or to do the training that needs to be done to get better at that. And that all comes from seeking out the best. And don't ever think that you're not worth our time, because the only way that you get to the point where you're not worth our time is if you prove otherwise, right? Everybody gets their freebie. Everybody gets that one chance where you come up to me and you say, hey, can you help me with my fighting? Yeah, I'm going to help you. But if you're not putting in the time on your own, if you're not doing the work to get better at what we do, that gets old for me really fast, especially when there are so many other people that are going to put that work in, that are going to benefit from the information that I have. So it gets old. So, that there is a price to pay, and that price is simply that you are going to do something with this. Because if you do something with this information, you don't have to ask me for it anymore, because I'm just going to start ramming it down your throat because I know you want it, and I know you're going to do something with it. Yep. And, when I see something that needs to be fixed, I'm just going to tell you, and I'm not going to, I don't have to ask because I know you want it. And you don't have to ask me because, if I see something, I'm going to give it to you. And we're dying to give this away. So I guess that covers the basics of it. So
absolutely.
I don't know if you got any questions before we open it up to anybody else who might be out there.
So as Sir Helga challenged me, is to, out of these 5, which one was the easiest to come to you? And well, obviously we probably know that one, but I'll let you answer it. And which one was the one that was the hardest for you to accomplish?
So I would say that the easiest one for me was passion.
Okay.
And simply because, from the very instant that I saw this sport, I knew that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. I can't explain how I knew that. I can't explain why it has captivated me the way that it has. But but there's never been anything else that I've looked at instantly and said that I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, the passion was just there. And again, I didn't have to develop it. I didn't even know this thing existed. And then as soon as I saw it, I'm like, well, here I am. I'm like, I'm right where I belong. And so, and when Brian first asked me, have you ever thought about fighting? When I was like 12, and I was like, yeah, oh yeah, it's only going to do this. And then we made some arrangements for him to start, working with me. But there was never a question. I mean, I saw it and I knew I was going to do it. So passion is by far the easiest thing the easiest of these things for me. And that's why it's really hard for me to. That's why I say that it's something I can't teach, right?
Right.
If passion was something I had to develop, then I might have some idea about how somebody else could develop that for themselves. But I never had to. So I don't know how to create passion.
Yeah.
Because it's just always been there for me. And that's why it's so easy, and that's why it's the one thing I can't teach. I can teach anything else. I can teach you any physical skill, mental skill you need. I just can't teach you how to give a shit about our sport. Hang on a second. No. Okay. So, and honestly, the most difficult of those was the victory conditions. That was the hardest lesson for me to learn. Training methodology was something I didn't really know about. But Brian was doing it for me before I knew such a thing existed. Pell work was something I was doing from day one because Brian said to do it, and seeking out the best those were all things that Brian just said do, and I just did, and that was fine. The victory conditions for me was absolutely the hardest thing to learn. Having been knighted before I was in the military, when I got out of the Navy, I'd had this. I was just racked with all this could have, would have, should have nonsense about how, well, if I hadn't gone out of the Navy, then I could have been king by now, or I could have been prince by now. And the reality is that yes, I could have been king, and I would have been the worst king ever, and I probably would have just been a count because nobody else would want me to be king ever again. Because I was just not ready. I wasn't ready for it at that age. But you don't know that. You don't know that when you're in your teens and early 20s, and you just want to do this thing. And so when I got out, there was a lot of heartache. There was a lot of every time I didn't win, crown and coronet list, I was just wrecked. And the day I was finally able to get over that, the day as I described earlier, when I said, I know that I'm going to go deep in this list. I know that I'm going to do well. I can't really explain like how I got over that. It was definitely one of those just epiphany things that once I finally let go of that, that's when everything changed. And the day that happened, I know exactly when it happened for me. I know I know exactly when I was able to redefine my victory conditions, and when I was able to finally get over myself. And that was the day that I won the 17th list, coronet list of Artemisia.
Okay.
18. I was the second to last prince of Artemisia. And that day that I went in that list, I didn't plan on winning necessarily. I just knew I was going to go deep. I knew I was going to do well. And it was the fact that I was able to let go of that I was able to finally fight freely, and I was able to just execute whatever my fight is, to just fight the best fight that I had at that moment. And as most of my students have heard me say countless times, fight the fight you have, not the fight you wish you had.
Yeah.
And being able to just execute and know that, your fight's either good enough or it's not. And if it's not good enough, then we'll find out why. But yeah, it seemed like an eternity from the time that I got out of the military to the time I actually won coronet list. It seemed like, and the intent, and it was just the intensity of it, right? Because every time I didn't win, right? Because that was my victory condition, is like, I got to win crown, I got to win coronet list. And every time that didn't happen, man, I was like really abusive to myself.
I can relate
and
to
what
that.
what a gigantic failure that I must be because I didn't win the list. And it was when I finally let go of that and got over that. That's when things really took off for me. And honestly, and I can tell you, having been through that experience, that is when fighting became a lot more fun for me too. I was able to truly just enjoy competing in the list, regardless of whether or not I won the list. And now, having won several crowns, I've had to fight with a glaive so that I could still, fight competitively, and to try to win, without, going home with the job at the end of the day.
Who wants that? Who wants a job for winning a tournament?
Job, yeah. But it's fighting with a glaive is it's a weapons form that is a work in progress for me, but it still allows me to fight as hard as I can, even though it's a weapon system that is somewhat compromised. It's not my primary weapon system, but I still get that competitive nature. I still get to fight, and I still get to compete in crown lists because there's just nothing. There's just nothing like fighting in crown list. And I could easily, I could fight with a glaive in the pools and say, well, if I would have got out of the pools, then I would have, or if I would have been in the list for real, I would have got out of the pools. I'm like, yeah, we could say that, but man, that's where the list really begins. And that's where things really start to matter, when you get into the quarterfinals and the semifinals. And in Artemisia's Crown, I've been to the quarterfinals 3 times with the glaive, and I've been to the semis with the one time. I was at West Crown March last year, and I went 7 rounds with a glaive. Really didn't expect that, but I got to. I get to try. I get to compete. I get to compete at the highest level I can, and that all comes from victory conditions. I mean, when I went to March Crown in the West last year, fighting with the glaive, I figured I'd go 4, maybe 5 rounds, and then I'd go to the roses field and get some pickups and get some roses for my wife. And next thing you know, I'm like 7 rounds into it, which was basically ended up being the quarterfinals. And again, with victory conditions being different for me now, the 7th round fight that I had was against His Majesty Uther, and Uther, I was fighting with the glaive, and he came at me with his best weapon system, and he won. But the fight that I gave him in a loss is something I'm immensely proud of.
Absolutely.
I'm very happy with the fight that I gave him, and that's all. I mean, so victory conditions, I think, was the hardest thing for me to learn, but I think it's absolutely been the most valuable lesson that I've learned, and that's why I preach it as much as I do. It's because it is so valuable, and partially because it was so hard for me to learn as well.
Right.
And that's one thing that having the experiences I had, like I said, I can't teach you passion because I don't know how to develop passion. But I know how to get over victory conditions because I know what it feels like to expect victory, to expect to and I know what it feels like to have that expectation and to not get it, and how devastating it felt every time I didn't win a list. I'm like, I'm a miserable failure. And now I can truly enjoy and relish a loss as long as I put up a solid effort in that loss, because I can fight well and lose.
Yeah.
And I can be happy with that. And so that's why I teach it as much as I do, because it was the hardest thing for me to learn, and it is absolutely the most valuable lesson for me to learn.
Absolutely. One thing that, just to kind of reiterate on that, is in your YouTube videos, when you're teaching that demonstration in, I think it's in Athelmark or something like that, over
Probably Atlantia.
Atlantia, that's the one. And when it comes to victory conditions, you say like along the lines of, did you actually win that fight, or did you get lucky and get a lucky shot off on that fight? And so
right. One of the things that I talk to my students about is, if you, one of the questions I ask my squires when they go deep in a list, like here in Artemisia, we do a lot of pooled lists.
Oh yeah.
The biggest reason that we do that is because we're so spread out throughout the kingdom that you could travel for, half a day and then go to a tournament and go 2 and out and you're just done.
Yep.
And that's just not really a lot of fun for everybody. So we do a pooled list so that, if you have 32 people in any given list, that means you get 8 fights in each of your pools.
Yeah.
And you get a fight round robin, you get to fight 8 people. And, as I explained to my squire about a year and a half ago, so you went 0-9 in a tournament. That means that there's 9 people that should be able to tell you what's wrong with your fight, right? Yeah. Those are opportunities for you to isolate deficiencies, right? That's a lot of opportunity for people to do that. Oh shit! Sorry, got derailed. The question.
I didn't have.
Oh yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's yeah. So one of the
kind of going along those lines. So
right. So if as you go through the list and you win a handful of fights, right? Say there's 8 people on a list and you win 6 fights, right? The question that I ask my students is, of the fights you won, how many of those fights did you win, and how many of those fights did your opponent lose? And it's easy to say, well, I won all of them, but it's not. I mean, did you, for the fights that you won, did you, well, the easiest measure of whether or not you won a fight or your opponent lost a fight is whether or not that is repeatable.
Right.
Did you did you follow a process that you could follow again to get a victory on that same person again? Mm-hmm. Or did you guys just slog it out here and there and trade blows, left and right, and eventually one of you sneaks one in, right? That's not you winning a fight. That's, your opponent losing a fight. And it's just one of those things that you can look at to kind of just take a, honestly, I think looking at a fight that way really gets you back to what Helga had talked about in her episode on ruthless self-assessment, right?
Yep, exactly.
Not all victories are created equal.
No.
Right. It's really easy to just put a W in the win, put a check in the win column and move on and think that think that you could do that over and over again. But it's not. I mean, if we look at if you look at professional sports, when you get down to the end of a basketball game and it comes down to like a 1-2 point game and the game gets decided, people bitch about the game's getting decided by the referees.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, well, the ref called a foul right at the end and he ended up shooting 2 foul shots and we ended up losing the game because they called a foul.
Right.
Like, well, if you were that much better than your opponent, then you should just blown them away and beaten them by 10 points anyway, and make it so that that they're not close enough that they can win on a foul shot.
Right.
Right. So did you win that game? And yeah, even if you say that, well, they only won because the ref called a foul at the end. Like, okay, yeah, they didn't really win that game. You lost that game.
Right.
And it's just another way to kind of look at it to again, getting back to that cycle, getting back to the training methodology and getting back to the why and the passion and the, it's like, yeah, you beat this guy, kind of, but could you do it again? Can you do it when it matters? Can you do it every time that it has to happen? And I've had some finals of Crown where I have completely dominated, and I've had some finals of Crown where I just got by. I had some finals of Crown where my opponent just got by.
Yep.
And it happens. And, and it's, if you look at those, all of those losses or all those victories, that the win-loss count just doesn't tell the whole story. And I guess that's what the victory conditions is to me, is that it's, you can't just measure it in wins and losses. It's not enough to just say, because one of the things that I get, when I'm doing training with somebody and I say, I was like, yeah, you won this fight, but you did this wrong. You did this one thing. You need to work on this one thing. And when I have somebody say, oh, well, it worked, didn't it?